7 years ago, when the Supreme Court cleared the way for legalized sports betting across the U.S., the mood was electric.
Oh, totally. It was seen as this massive new revenue stream, a way to bring a shadow industry into the light.
And a promise of integrity through regulation.
Right. But fast forward to 2025, this is the year that promise really faced its biggest reality check.
Yeah, it felt like a tipping point.
It was a genuine watershed moment. There's this industry consultant, Max Bitzel. He called it a once-in-a-lifetime event watching these worlds collide.
Yeah.
And he was spot on.
A perfect storm.
Exactly. Perfect storm of challenges. We saw integrity failures at the highest levels, a tech disruption that just sort of bypassed all the rules, and then this quiet but punishing change in tax law.
And the public definitely noticed. We've got this data from a Pew Research poll late in the year, and the shift in how people see all this is pretty stark. Back in 2022, only about a third of U.S. adults thought legalized betting was bad for society. By the end of 2025,
It jumped.
it jumped sharply all the way up to 43%.
That's a huge erosion of trust in just a few years. And what's even more concerning for the games themselves, 40% of people are now saying it's bad for sports. That's up from 33%. The honeymoon is officially over.
So for you, if you want to understand the forces that are reshaping this entire industry right now, you really have to look at these three massive pressure points that all peaked in 2025.
And that's what we're doing.
Yep. Our deep dive today is focused on unpacking them. First, the huge integrity crisis, this period of just intense, very visible scandal. Then we'll get into the regulatory disruption from the meteoric rise of prediction markets.
And finally, that quiet but fundamental shift in U.S. tax law that kind of threatens the whole regulated market.
That first point, the integrity crisis, it just exploded in the fall.
It really did.
So let's start there. We're calling this peak scandal because the sheer volume, the speed of these high-profile cases, it suggested it wasn't just a few isolated incidents.
No, it felt like a deeper, more systemic vulnerability across all the major leagues, really.
Think about the calendar. In just 5 weeks, gambling cases were just dominating the headlines.
Almost daily. You had the FBI meeting with the UFC about a fight that was allegedly rigged.
Then federal authorities indict 2 MLB pitchers, Emmanuel Kleiss and Luis Ortiz, for rigging pitches.
And at the same time, the NCAA accuses 6 former men's college basketball players in these schemes. It was just one thing after another.
And that was all right after those federal arrests, right? The ones that charged 34 people with huge names like Terry Rozier from the Heat, Chauncey Billups,
A head coach for the Trailblazers, and former player Damon Jones. Now, they all pleaded not guilty, but the message was just so clear.
the system was being tested.
And in a lot of places, it was failing.
So what's the common thread here? When you look across all these cases, from rigged pitches to the college stuff, it all points to one thing.
Manipulating individual performance. It's not about throwing the whole game anymore. That's way too hard to coordinate. We're talking about micromanipulations. A specific type of pitch, a certain number of turnovers, or just how many points one guy scores.
Which brings us right to the prop bet, the proposition bet.
The biggest vulnerability.
Absolutely. And they are the foundation for this explosion in parlays, especially same-game parlays, where you can just string a bunch of these player bets together. DraftKings even reported a huge spike in that between 2024 and 2025.
And that combination is just so dangerous. You've got all this money pouring into player props, and at the same time, you have an NCAA official saying, on the record, that these bets are a lot easier for match fixing.
Why is that?
Because it all comes down to one person's behavior.
Yeah.
If you're a third-string guy on a small college team, or even a pitcher who isn't making generational wealth, the incentive to, say, shave a few points or throw a specific pitch, it's a huge vulnerability.
So the leagues had to react. They were scrambling.
Yeah, and MLB came out and put a $200 limit on any bets involving individual pitches after the indictments.
$200? I mean, is that really a deterrent for someone who can actually manipulate the outcome?
That's the exact question Congress started asking. The industry advocates, the Sports Betting Alliance, they immediately came out and said the arrests prove the system is working.
How so?
Their argument is that their monitoring systems caught the bad actors, and if you start restricting these bets, you just push all that wagering back into the illegal black markets where they can't see anything.
Which, okay, that's a fair point about how markets work.
It is, but the U.S. Senate committee was not buying it. They sent out letters warning about a new integrity crisis. They said that manipulation happening across multiple leagues points to a deeper systemic vulnerability that Congress needs to scrutinize.
So it wasn't just about catching a few bad guys.
No, it was about the structure of the bets themselves, creating too many opportunities for fixing. It's like treating the symptom versus treating the disease. The whole crisis showed the rules, which were designed for simple win-loss bets, just weren't ready for the prop bet market.
Right. So while everyone was fighting over these internal integrity threats, this whole other external challenge was blowing up, something that threatened to upend the entire regulatory system. The rise of prediction markets.
Oh, this is a true disruptor. It challenges the very definition of what we even call gambling. The growth rate is just staggering. Kalshi, one of the big platforms, announced they were trading over $1 billion a week.
$1 billion.
A week.
A week. 1,000% increase from the year before. And then Polymarket, the global giant, was making moves to expand in the U.S.
Okay, so to get why this matters so much, you have to understand how they're different. A traditional sportsbook, like a DraftKings or FanDuel, they're the house.
You bet against them.
Exactly. You lose, they win your money.
Yeah.
And they take a little cut to make sure they're profitable.
Prediction markets are totally different. They're exchanges. You aren't betting against the house. You're trading contracts with other users. It's more like a stock market for ideas.
So they don't care who wins or loses. Not at all. They're agnostic. Their money comes from a tiny transaction fee, like a stockbroker.
And the founders are using that difference to argue for a completely separate set of rules.
Right. Kalshi's co-founder, Tariq Mansour, he actually questioned if his product is even gambling. He said, if we are gambling, then I think you're basically calling the entire financial market gambling.
Which leads right into this massive regulatory battle. If they can frame themselves as financial products,
They fall under the federal oversight of the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And here's the kicker, that federal oversight lets them operate in all 50 states.
all 50, instantly.
They get to bypass that whole state-by-state licensing nightmare that the sportsbooks have to deal with.
Which is only, what, 39 states plus D.C. for the traditional guys?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can see why state gaming regulators are furious. They're arguing these contracts are basically sports bets and should fall under state law.
And the leagues are getting involved, too. They're raising some serious integrity questions.
Yeah, Jeff Miller, an EVP for the NFL, he testified that these prediction markets don't have that comprehensive state regulatory framework.
Yeah.
So they're much more susceptible to manipulation because those state-level guardrails do not exist.
And this is where we get some really bizarre examples. The NFL pointed to markets that were taking trades on whether specific phrases,
This is wild.
like concussion protocol or roughing the passer, would be said out loud during a game broadcast.
Wait, hold on. Betting on what words an announcer's going to say? That sounds completely insane.
It does. But a former CFTC official, Ian McGinley, he connected it right back to our first segment on prop bets.
Ow.
He argued these mentioned markets are just like player props. A player controls if they score 8 points, and a broadcaster, who's just one person on a live mic, could control if they say 10 specific words.
The same integrity vulnerability is there. Wow.
It really highlights how manipulation isn't just about the players. It could be about controlling the broadcast itself.
The prediction markets have a defense, though.
They do. The Coalition for Prediction Markets, they disputed the NFL's claims. They argue that CFTC regulations already ban manipulative trading, just like the SEC does for the stock market.
And the momentum is on their side. When you see big players like DraftKings, Fanatics, Prize Picks, all rushing to get into this space,
Yeah, it's a signal.
it signals that Tariq Mansour is probably right. These markets are here to stay, whether state regulators like it or not.
Okay, so let's turn to the third major challenge of 2025. This one is less sensational than player indictments or tech wars, but it might be the most damaging to the health of the whole regulated market.
The money angle.
The money angle. Specifically, a radical change in U.S. tax law that took effect on January 1st.
This was buried inside President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It targets professional bettors who itemize, and it just completely changes how they calculate profit and loss.
It effectively jacks up their tax burden. Massively.
Yeah, and we should probably unpack this slowly because the financial hit, especially for high-volume folks operating on thin margins, is just, it's punitive.
So, under the old law, a pro bettor could deduct 100% of their losses against their winnings.
Right, so if you spend 100 grand on wagers and you win 100 grand, you broke even. Your taxable income from gambling was zero. You owe zero tax.
Simple enough? Makes sense.
The new law changes all that. Now, professional bettors who itemize can only deduct 90% of their losses against their winnings.
Okay, so let's use that professor's example we found. You spend 100 grand to win 100 grand. You still broke even in reality.
But the government only lets you deduct 90,000 of your losses.
So you're left paying tax on a $10,000 difference, on money that doesn't actually exist.
Exactly. You're paying tax on the 10% of losses that were disallowed. Think about that. You could have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars for the year overall, but you'd still face a significant tax bill.
You're paying tax on winnings without being able to fully account for all the money you locked to get them.
It just raises taxes on all winnings for professional players. Full stop.
And the pros are not happy. Bill Krackomberger, a well-known bettor, said the change literally singles out gamblers and will get rid of the pros and a lot of the Joes who are operating legally.
And this is where the money issue circles right back to the integrity question we started with.
Right. Congresswoman Dina Titus, her district includes Las Vegas, she warned that the immediate consequence of this tax is driving players toward offshore and unregulated black markets.
Which completely undermines all the consumer protection and integrity work the states have been trying to build for years.
Congress's tax committee estimated this change would raise about $1.1 billion in revenue. But Titus argues the real number will be way less because all the sophisticated bettors are just going to move their action.
And why wouldn't they? Why would you bet legally if you're forced to pay tax on money you effectively lost? It makes no sense.
That political fight is still going on. Congresswoman Titus introduced a bill to restore the 100% deductibility, and it even has some bipartisan support.
But with the legislative clock winding down for the year, it seems almost certain that this higher tax burden is just the reality for now.
So what does this all mean for you watching this industry evolve? I mean, 2025 was truly a defining year because of this confluence of factors. We saw these huge scandals expose fundamental integrity flaws, especially in those wildly popular prop bets. We saw prediction markets just completely challenge the state regulatory system.
And then we saw the federal government, through tax law, actively incentivize legitimate players to abandon the very systems that the states had worked so hard to build. The central conflict is all about clarity and control.
Right.
The scandals prove we need more vigilance, but the tax law is eroding the base of good customers, and the prediction markets are operating completely outside of state control.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you. The industry advocates, they consistently argue that the existence of legal, regulated sports books is the best defense against corruption.
Because their monitoring systems are supposed to flag suspicious activity.
Exactly. So if that's true, what happens when a federal tax change pushes sophisticated, high-volume bettors, the very people who generate the most data for monitoring toward unregulated offshore markets?
Yeah, that's the question. The NFL warned Congress that prediction markets lack the monitoring guardrails to protect integrity. So if you extend that same concern to the black markets that Congresswoman Titus warned about, you have to ask.
Does the federal pursuit of an estimated $1.1 billion in tax revenue inadvertently undermine the very integrity lawmakers are trying to secure?
It suggests the government, in its hunt for revenue, might be creating the exact conditions, these unmonitored shadow markets for smart players, that could facilitate the next big wave of corruption. Something for you to keep an eye on.